Picture this. October 1961. Harold Macmillan is Prime Minister, the Beatles are still playing the Cavern Club in Liverpool, and Britain's roads are about to witness something extraordinary. The Austin-Cambridge A60 rolls off the Longbridge production line, a sensible, well-built family saloon that would go on to sell more than 276,000 units before 1969. But here's what puzzles enthusiasts to this day. Despite selling in respectable numbers right up until the end, the Cambridge simply vanished. No fanfare, no successor bearing its name, just gone. And if you lived through that era, you know this wasn't just another forgotten saloon. The Cambridge was the car your bank manager drove, the one the police trusted, the vehicle that ferried families across Britain for 15 years. So what really happened? Why did a car that was still selling, that was actually profitable in a market segment Ford dominated with the Cortina, just disappear? The answer isn't what you might think. This isn't a story about sales failure or quality issues. It's far more interesting than that. The Cambridge's demise tells us everything about what went wrong with the British motor industry in the 1960s. It's about corporate politics, badge engineering gone mad, and a management structure that couldn't decide whether it was running one company or half a dozen competing fiefdoms. The Cambridge didn't die because customers stopped wanting it. It died because the British Motor Corporation had lost the plot entirely. Let's dig into the real story, one that involves ego, poor planning, and a revolutionary new car that was supposed to change everything but ended up sealing the Cambridge's fate instead. Section 1. The Cambridge that worked. Before we understand what killed the Cambridge, we need to appreciate what made it successful in the first place. The A60 Cambridge sold well, with 276,534 being built before production finally ended in 1969. To put that in perspective, that's roughly 39,000 cars per year over 7 years of production, not spectacular by Cortina standards, but solid and profitable. The A60, introduced in October 1961, was powered by a 1.622 cubic centimeter B-series four-cylinder engine. This engine displaced 99 cubic inches and produced 61 brake horsepower at 4,500 revolutions per minute. Modest by today's standards, certainly, but perfectly adequate for the era. The Motor magazine tested both manual and automatic versions in 1961. The manual version achieved a top speed of 80.4 miles per hour and managed the 0 to 60 sprint in 19.8 seconds. The test car cost £883, including £278 in taxes. For comparison, the four-door Ford Cortina Deluxe cost £687, nearly £200 less. There's your first clue about the challenges ahead. But the Cambridge had advantages Ford couldn't match. It featured independent suspension at the front by coil springs and wishbones, with a live axle at the rear, and anti-roll bars at both front and rear. The ride quality was superior to the Cortinas, the build felt more substantial, and BMC dealers swore by its reliability. The taxi trade certainly believed in it. Cambridge saloons became a common sight in British cities, their robust construction and spacious interiors perfect for professional use. But the car's dominating popularity with the Hong Kong taxi trade was even more impressive. When you're running a taxi in Hong Kong's demanding conditions, you choose what lasts, and they chose the Cambridge. Australian buyers got something even better. Released in 1962, the Austin Freeway was an Australian-built variant of the A60 Cambridge, powered by a six-cylinder version of the BMC B-Series engine. That straight six transformed the car's character entirely, and Australian customers snapped them up. Here's what matters. The Cambridge worked. It was engineered properly, built to a standard, and did exactly what a family saloon should do. It wasn't exciting, but it wasn't supposed to be, and yet by 1969 it was gone. Section 2. The company that couldn't decide what it was. To understand the Cambridge's fate, you need to understand the madness that was the British Motor Corporation. When BMC was formed in 1952 by merging the Nuffield and Austin interests, The Nuffield organization's brands Morris, MG, Riley, and Wolseley joined forces with Austin. On paper, this created Britain's largest car manufacturer, controlling 39% of the domestic market. In reality, it created a bureaucratic nightmare. Austin's management systems, especially cost control and marketing, were not as good as Nuffield's, and as the market changed from a shortage of cars to competition, this was to tell. But the deeper problem was philosophical. Austin's Leonard Lord dominated the merged company, and he brought Austin's culture with him, but he never truly integrated the two operations. Here's where it gets absurd. Both the Longbridge and Cowley plants were producing badge-engineered models of otherwise identical Austin and Morris cars so that each dealer network would have a product to sell. Think about that. The same basic car, built in two different factories, sold through competing dealer networks under different names. Austin and Morris dealers still fought each other for sales in every high street in Britain. The Cambridge wasn't just the Cambridge, it was also the Morris Oxford Series 6. Same car, different grille and badges. Over 149,994 of 55 Mark IIs were built. Add the Oxford numbers and you start to see the scale we're talking about. But wait, it gets worse. In 1958, BMC hired Battista Farina to redesign its entire car line, resulting in the creation of 3 Farina saloons, each badge engineered to fit various BMC car lines. The mid-sized Farina was launched with the Wolseley 1560, followed by the Riley 468, the Austin A55 Cambridge Mark II, the MG Magnet Mark III, and the Morris Oxford V. 5 brands, same basic car, different badges, different dealer networks, all competing for the same customers. This wasn't efficiency, this was corporate insanity dressed up as giving dealers what they wanted. The biggest selling car, the Mini, was famously analyzed by Ford Motor Company, which concluded that BMC must have been losing £30 on every one sold. When your best-selling car loses money on every unit, you've got fundamental problems with cost control and pricing strategy. By the mid-1960s, BMC was hemorrhaging profits despite selling decent volumes. The badge engineering that was supposed to keep dealers happy was actually destroying the company's ability to invest in new models. Every pound spent supporting multiple versions of the same car was a pound that couldn't go into development or marketing. And then came the car that was supposed to fix everything. Section 3. The land crab that ate the Cambridge. In October 1964, BMC unveiled what it believed would be the future. The Austin 1800, internally known as ADO 17, and universally nicknamed the Land Crab. Designed by Alec Isigonis, the 1800 used front-wheel drive, a transverse engine, and hydroelastic suspension. It was shorter than a Cortina, yet offered more cabin space than a Ford Zodiac. On paper, it was brilliant, space-efficient, technically advanced, and exactly what modern families needed. The 1800 was voted European Car of the Year for 1965. The motoring press marveled at its packaging, its ride quality, and its innovative approach. Here was Britain's answer to the conventional rear-wheel drive saloons from Ford and Vauxhall. But BMC made 2 critical mistakes. First, the styling. Where the Cambridge looked conventional and reassuring, the Land Crab looked odd. Its exceptional width earned it that nickname, and many potential buyers simply couldn't get past the appearance. BMC claimed the 1800 resulted from a collaboration between Pininfarina and Isigonis, but Isigonis was mainly responsible for its lines. And Isigonis, brilliant engineer though he was, had never met a styling flourish he couldn't strip away in pursuit of function. Second, and far more damaging, it was decided to fit the 1800 with the expanded 1.8-litre engine developed for the MGB and to market it as a wholly separate model, which was an extremely risky sales decision, as figures from 1960 show that a mere 5% of new car registrations were in the 1,700 to 1,800 cubic centimetre sector. Read that again. BMC positioned its new wonder car in a market segment that barely existed. The Cambridge sat squarely in the heart of the market, the 1.5 to 1.6-litre family saloon class, where the Cortina dominated. The Landcrab sat above it, in no man's land, priced too high for Cambridge buyers but not posh enough to compete with genuine executive cars. Sales did not reach BMC's expectations, for one problem was that the Austin seemed to occupy a strange marketing netherworld between the A60 Cambridge and the A110 Westminster. Dealers didn't know how to position it, customers didn't know who it was for, and all the while, the Cortina just kept selling and selling. Here's the tragedy. The Landcrab had a fantastic ride, massive interior space, and the 2200 versions were very refined and quite powerful. Once early reliability issues were sorted, it was actually a good family car. But buyers and mechanics seemed to prefer the simpler and cheaper rear-wheel drive Cortina over the advanced front-wheel drive Landcrab. And so, we come to the Cambridge's death sentence. The A60's intended successor, the front-wheel drive Austin 1800 of 1964, did not affect sales, so Cambridge production was continued until 1969. The Landcrab was supposed to replace the Cambridge. When it failed to do so, BMC found itself supporting two model lines when it could barely afford one. Something had to give. Section 4. Ford shows how it's done. While BMC was drowning in badge engineering and positioning problems, Ford was writing the textbook on how to dominate a market segment. Using the project name Archbishop, management at Ford of Britain in Dagenham created the Cortina, aimed at buyers of the Morris Oxford Farina and Vauxhall Victor, launching on the 20th of September, 1962. The brief was simple: economical to buy, cheap to run, easy and inexpensive to produce in Britain. Ford's strategy was ruthlessly effective. The Cortina Mark II was launched in October 1966, starting with a 1,300 cubic centimeter engine with a 1,500 option. The new car was wider and roomier than the Mark I. As people became more affluent, they wanted to trade up to bigger and better cars, and Ford gave them exactly what they wanted, at the right price, at the right time. The results speak for themselves. The Cortina beat the BMC 1100/1300 in 1967 and became the best-selling car of the 1970s in the UK. From 1972 to 1981, the Cortina enjoyed an unbroken run as Britain's best-selling car. What made Ford different? Focus. While BMC was selling 5 versions of essentially the same car through competing dealer networks, Ford sold one Cortina. All the development money, all the marketing spend, all the dealer training, everything went into making that one car the best it could be. Ford also understood pricing psychology better than BMC ever did. Remember that the A60 Cambridge cost £883 in 1961, while the Cortina Deluxe cost £687. That £200 difference was enormous in an era when the average industrial wage was around £15 per week. The Cambridge was the better-built car with superior ride quality, but in the early 1960s, customers were learning that good enough at the right price beat better at a premium. The Cortina was good enough. More than good enough, in fact, because Ford constantly improved it, listening to customers and dealers, refining the formula year after year. By 1967, a Victor 101 Deluxe road test by Britain's Autocar magazine achieved a maximum speed of 81 miles per hour, which matched that achieved by a recently tested Austin A60 Cambridge and a Ford Cortina 1600 Deluxe. All 3 cars were competitive on performance, but the Cortina had momentum, dealer enthusiasm, and a clear market position. The Cambridge had none of those things. Section 5. The final years and the Marina debacle. Cambridge production continued until 1969 at the Morris plant at Cowley, when the Austin Maxi took over the production line. The Morris Oxford version continued until early 1971, when it was replaced by the Morris Marina. Think about that timeline. The Cambridge ended production in 1969. the Oxford soldiered on for another 2 years. And then came the Marina, a car so cynically conceived and poorly executed that it makes the Cambridge's demise look like a mercy killing. The Austin, Morris 1800, did not meet market needs, and the Morris Marina was hurriedly developed to replace the Farina. Hurriedly is the operative word. British Leyland, which BMC had become after a 1968 merger with Leyland, realized too late that killing the Cambridge while the Landcrab foundered had left a gaping hole in their lineup. The Marina was their panic response, a throwback to rear-wheel drive and conventional engineering, cobbled together from existing BMC parts bins and rushed to market in 1971. It sold reasonably well initially, but that had more to do with dealer desperation for anything to sell against the Cortina than any genuine merit. Here's what they should have done: kept developing the Cambridge. The A60 was sound engineering. Give it the same incremental improvements Ford lavished on the Cortina. Update the styling modestly every few years. Keep the price competitive. Support it properly with marketing and dealer incentives. Instead, BMC bet everything on the technically advanced but commercially flawed Landcrab, then panicked when it didn't sell, then rushed out the Marina as a desperate fix. 3 different strategies in 7 years, each contradicting the last. No wonder British Leyland was bankrupt by the mid-70s. The commercial versions tell a fascinating postscript to this story. Van and pickup versions based on the pre-Farina, a 55, were introduced in 1957 and remained in production until 1973. These workhorses, using the old styling but fitted with the larger engine, outlived the passenger car by 4 years. Why? Because commercial buyers cared about reliability and cargo capacity, not styling or technical sophistication. The fundamentals of the Cambridge were so sound that the van kept selling long after the saloon had vanished. So what really killed the Austin Cambridge? It wasn't poor sales. The car was still selling profitably when production ended. It wasn't quality problems. The Cambridge was fundamentally well engineered and reliable. It wasn't even competition from Ford, though the Cortina's success certainly didn't help. The Cambridge died because the British Motor Corporation had become so dysfunctional, so paralyzed by internal politics and badge engineering madness, that it couldn't make rational decisions about its product lineup. The company tried to support too many brands, too many models, too many competing dealer networks, all while hemorrhaging money on cars like the Mini that sold in huge volumes but lost money on every sale. When the Landcrab failed to replace the Cambridge as planned, BMC lacked the resources and the organizational coherence to simply keep both cars in production. So the Cambridge, despite its strengths, became collateral damage in a corporate implosion that would eventually require government bailouts and lead to the creation of British Leyland, a company that would itself collapse spectacularly by the late 70s. The real tragedy? Japan was watching all this unfold. Nissan assembled Austin Cambridges under license in the 1950s, and by 1957, Austin's engineers reported that Nissan-built Cambridges were of the same quality as English-built versions, and later in the production run, the cars were of superior quality. The Japanese learned British engineering, improved on it, and then used those lessons to build an automotive industry that would eventually crush what remained of British car manufacturing. Today, Austin Cambridge survivors are increasingly rare. The cars that do exist are cherished by enthusiasts who remember what they really were: honest, well-built family transport from an era when Britain still knew how to make a proper saloon car. They're a reminder of what might have been if only the company building them had been run with a fraction of the competence that went into designing them. If you owned one, or if your parents drove one, I'd love to hear your memories in the comments below. What was it like living with a Cambridge? Did yours last forever, or did the tin worm get it in the end? And, for those of you old enough to remember, did you see the shift coming when British cars went from being the obvious choice to something you only bought if you had to? If you enjoyed this deep dive into automotive history, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that like button. We dig into the real stories behind the cars that shaped motoring history, not just the headlines, but the fascinating details that explain why things turned out the way they did. Thank you for watching, and remember, every car has a story. Sometimes it's just not the one you expected.